I didn't expect peace when Marla invited me to the family hike, but I didn't expect war either. She called it a healing walk, a tradition to honor Mom, she said. Just us siblings, no lawyers, no documents, no tension. Asheville was starting to cool, leaves turning gold. The air that morning smelled like damp pine and false hope. I wore boots, layered up. When I stepped out from the guest wing, Marla was already waiting near the trailhead, hair done, smile tight. She handed me a thermos and said, "You finally got up early." I smiled back. That's what we did, pretend. The hike started quietly, birds overhead, light slicing through tree limbs. It was almost beautiful, almost honest. Marla made small talk. Dad was coping. Harlan was working too much. She asked how my business was doing, then cut me off before I could answer. Typical. I asked her gently why we hadn't talked after Mom's death. She said I'd been so sensitive at the funeral. "You cried so much people thought you were unstable." Then she laughed, not loudly, just enough to sound like she was half kidding. I didn't answer. I was learning not to. The trail narrowed. Marla stepped ahead, motioning me to follow. "Careful," she said, without turning back. "It gets slippery." And then, it happened. She reached her hand toward me, not quite offering it. Just, there. I stepped toward her, and her arm moved. Not back, not up, just enough to make me believe she might steady me, but she didn't. I slipped. My foot lost its grip. My hands went out to catch a root that wasn't there. My hip slammed the ground first, then my elbow, then my back. Air shot from my lungs. I heard the sound of my own breath, ragged and panicked. Then I heard her voice. "You okay? You slipped." I opened my eyes. She was standing where I'd been, not moving, not running to help, just watching. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. That wasn't a slip. That was a decision. I laid there longer than I needed to, because getting up meant facing her again. Back at the house, no one looked up when I limped in. I said I fell. Marla said, "Told her to watch that corner. She never listens." Harlan chuckled. Dad didn't speak, just turned a page in his book. "You've always been a little clumsy," someone said. I don't remember who. It could have been any of them. They all rehearsed the same lines. I went to my room, iced my ankle, listened to them laugh from the kitchen. I remembered something from when I was 9. I cried after a cousin's birthday party. Marla had humiliated me in front of her friends. Mom told me, "You feel too much, Destry. That's your problem." Maybe it still is. 2 days later, they gathered us in the dining room. No lawyers, just Jory, family friend, lifelong executor, neutral party. A mahogany box held Mom's revised will. Each of us got a printed copy. Mine was thinner than theirs. I flipped through it. The sections about property were intact. The sections about control, redacted, not lightly crossed out, blacked out, omitted like I was never meant to see them. My name wasn't listed as a trustee. I blinked. "Mom thought it'd be too much pressure," Marla said, as if reading a grocery list. Jory didn't meet my eyes. He tapped his pen, then nodded as if he agreed. Harlan leaned back, silent. Dad coughed into his napkin. "We all have different roles." I looked at the paper again. My hands didn't shake. I thought they would, but they didn't. That wasn't a will. That was a warning. I folded the document, slid it back into the envelope. The room buzzed with nothing. No one stopped to ask how I felt. No one checked if I was okay. They're erasing me, and no one's stopping them. I showed up to the brunch like I hadn't fallen down a hill 2 days before. My ankle still stiff, my ribs sore, but I wore a long skirt and kept my back straight. That was the unspoken dress code in this family. Look fine, act finer. The garden had been trimmed and manicured, like everything else Marla touched. Tables with white cloths, lemon water in glass pitchers. The kind of setup that said, "Look how put together we are," even when the glue was cracking. Marla stood at the center of it all, greeting guests like she was hosting a charity gala, not a private brunch. Harlan leaned back on a wooden bench, drink in hand, laughing at something she said. Dad, Dr. Dale Walden, sat beneath the big oak tree, reading the same book I'd seen on his nightstand for 3 years. Same spot, same silence. I stepped onto the grass. No one turned. Marla looked up, gave me that tight smile. "Glad you could make it," she said, like I was a guest showing up late to a dinner party I hadn't RSVP'd for. A family friend approached, arm around some man I didn't recognize. "This is Destry," she said to him, smiling. "Cousin from out of state." Marla didn't correct her. That's when it hit me. They weren't fighting me, they were skipping me. Harlan raised a glass later that morning. Everyone stood around, forks paused mid-air. "To Marla," he said, clear and warm, "for being the spine of this family through everything." He looked at me when he said it. Not long, just a flicker. Then he added, "Some of us carry the weight. Others feel it more intensely." The crowd chuckled, clinked glasses. I didn't. That line, it wasn't new. I'd heard versions of it my whole life. When Marla lied and I cried, I was too sensitive. When I asked questions, I was disruptive. That toast wasn't flattery, it was framing. This is how they do it. Rewrite the story. In public. With applause, I didn't speak. I should have, but I didn't. And that silence, God, it felt louder than if I'd screamed. Afterward, I helped collect plates like nothing happened. I walked the table, picking up glasses, folding napkins. I wasn't trying to help. I just needed to move. That's when I saw it. Marla's wrist. The bracelet. Thin gold, with a tiny sapphire in the center. Our mother's favorite. She wore it every day until the day she died. "Where'd you get that?" I asked. Marla looked down, then back at me. "This?" she said casually. "Mom gave it to me." I blinked. "No, she gave that to me when she was in the hospital." "You must have misunderstood," she said, just loud enough for the others nearby to hear. "You know how memories get blurry." I felt something slip in my chest. Not anger. Not even grief. It was like someone knocked a picture off the wall, and when I went to pick it up, it wasn't broken, but the face inside had been replaced. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. I walked away because if I didn't, I'd cry, and they'd use that too. If memories are up for grabs, what's left of me? I stood by the hedge line for a while, watching the others talk, laugh, sip lemonade, Marla tossing her hair back, Harlan handing a drink to someone, Dad still reading. That's when I remembered something. I was 14. Marla was already 20, back from college. I had just drawn something for Mom's birthday, a sketch of her holding me when I was little. She teared up. Marla rolled her eyes and left the room. That night, Mom found the sketch torn in half and shoved in my backpack. She held it up like I'd vandalized my own work. I took the blame. I was scared to correct her. And then she said it, the first time I ever heard the phrase, "You're just too emotional to be trusted." I didn't push back then. Just like I didn't push back now. This isn't new. It's just cleaner now. More rehearsed. They don't rip up drawings anymore. They just repurpose memories, reassign legacy, smile while they do it. Later that day, I wandered the house alone. Upstairs, the hallway held a long wall of family photos. Weddings, birthdays, holidays lined in matching black frames. I paused at one near the end. My graduation. Or what used to be my graduation. There was Mom, smiling, Dad with his hand on her shoulder, Marla, grinning, and me, except not. My figure was there. The shape, the dress, but the face, my face, was blurred, either edited or replaced entirely. I stood there, mouth dry, eyes fixed. No one else noticed. They didn't need to scream me out. They were cropping me out quietly. I found out about the dinner party from Facebook. Not an invite, not a group message, just a picture. Marla in her black dress, Harlan at her side, glasses raised in mid-toast. The caption read, "Just the family." It took a second to land. Then it hit hard. I wasn't just excluded, I was being phased out. They didn't argue with me, didn't shame me in public. They just kept doing things without me. Like I never belonged in the first place. The house was quiet that night. Too quiet. Not peaceful. Heavy. Like walking through a place haunted by the living. I passed the hallway where the family portraits hung. Their smiles followed me like ghosts. Every corner whispered things I couldn't unhear. You're not needed. You're not part of this. In the kitchen, there was leftover cake from the party. No one offered me a slice. No one even asked if I was okay. A few years back, I caught the flu in college. I didn't call anyone, didn't ask for help. Still, Mom showed up 6 hours later with soup and a bag of oranges. Now, they were having dinners and taking photos, without me, like it was normal. That same night, I walked past Dad's study and noticed his desk drawer left open. Something about it stopped me. I wasn't snooping, I wasn't hunting. But I looked anyway. Inside was a slim manila folder labeled Family Holdings, Private. I flipped it open. It looked like estate paperwork, nothing I hadn't seen before. But then I saw my name, my full name, printed neat and official. Under it, emotional instability, advised not to manage estate assets. I blinked, read it again. It wasn't a diagnosis. It was a declaration. Strategic, intentional, cold. My hands didn't shake. Not because I wasn't furious, but because I wasn't surprised. They didn't just erase me. They documented why I shouldn't exist, on paper, with ink, in the kind of font you can't argue with. I pulled out my phone, took a photo of the page, tucked the folder back, shut the drawer gently, and I stood there, not crying, not yelling, just knowing. I walked down the hall. My feet carried me before my brain caught up. The gallery wall came into view, rows of frames, events, milestones. I stopped at one, Mom's 60th birthday. We were all there. She had cake in her hands. I remember because I baked it, carrot with pecans. I looked at my spot in the photo. I was holding the edge of the cake tray, smiling, barely in frame, but I was there. Except now, I wasn't. My face was blurred, not shadowed, not faded, digitally removed, or replaced. Clean, precise, deliberate. Nobody said a word about it. Nobody had to. They weren't yelling me out of this family. They were erasing me in high-resolution silence. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I reread the diagnosis on my phone screen. Emotionally unstable. 3 words that could end careers, end legacies. They hadn't called me names. They hadn't locked me out. They'd done something worse. They'd made me doubt if I ever belonged. My mind wandered back. Age 10. I drew a doghouse for art class. Won a ribbon. Marla told our mom I traced it from a book. Age 16. The neighbor's dog died. They said I forgot to feed it. I never touched the leash. College. I lost a necklace. Marla found it, gave it back to me a month later, said she was testing my memory. Little things, always little things. Mom used to say, "Destry, you remember too much." No, Mom, I remember just enough. My therapist once told me, the cruelest kind of erasure isn't forgetting, it's being remembered wrong. That night, I opened a blank notebook, wrote only one sentence. They've been preparing for this for years. The next morning, I walked past the same photo. I didn't look at the people. I looked at the glass. I saw my own reflection, still standing. If they'd rewritten my part in this family, then maybe it's time I start writing my own. 2 weeks passed. Nobody said a word about what happened at brunch. No apologies, no explanations, just radio silence wrapped in family smiles. Then, an email arrived from Jory Anders. Subject: Wellness Follow-Up. He called it a routine step, part of finalizing the estate proceedings. A simple health evaluation, he wrote, to ensure clarity moving forward. I read the email twice, then once more before closing my laptop. It wasn't about health. It was about leverage. Still, I went. Not because I trusted them. I didn't. But I needed them to see that I wasn't afraid to sit in their rooms, face their systems, speak in their language. I knew if I refused, they'd say I was unstable. If I agreed, they'd say I was compliant. Either way, I was cornered. The clinic was sterile. The kind of place that plays spa music to distract you from how cold the chairs feel. The therapist introduced herself like we were old friends. Her office smelled like eucalyptus and laminated betrayal. She didn't ask about my pain or what I'd been through. She asked things like, "Do you often feel your family misunderstands you?" Or, Would you say you experience emotions more intensely than others? Each question came with a smile, a pen stroke, and a sense that the answers didn't matter. I stayed calm, measured. But my eyes landed on the folder beside her laptop. It had my name on it. The words printed beneath were too familiar. Same language I saw on my father's desk that night. Emotional instability, not suited for asset responsibility. Not a diagnosis, a verdict. This wasn't a checkup. It was a setup. She excused herself to get tea. I leaned over, snapped a photo of the open file, and slid back into my seat before she returned. I ended the session early, didn't raise my voice, didn't explain myself, just left. Back at the estate, I didn't bother with greetings. I went straight to the garage, where I remembered the groundskeeper had mentioned something weeks ago, about trail cameras installed after a bobcat sighting. The cameras had been running the day of the hike. I found him by the shed, asked about the footage. He hesitated, said, "That section's corrupted, only a few hours missing." Just so happened to be the exact window when I fell. I asked for a copy. He looked uncomfortable. "It's not necessary. Ms. Marla already reviewed the tapes." That name again. I pressed. He finally admitted someone had logged in using her credentials days ago, just before the footage failed. I didn't yell. I thanked him and walked away. You can't lose what was never yours, but you can be denied the right to even look for it. By the time I reached my room, I felt the edges of my reality folding in again. I sat at the edge of the bed, hands still, back straight. I wasn't spiraling, I was recalibrating. Later that night, I knocked on Blythe's door. She let me in, no questions. We sat on the porch with nothing but old wind chimes and a shared understanding between us. I told her about the appointment, the file, the footage. She nodded, eyes heavy. "They did the same to me," she whispered. "When I asked about the trust fund for school, said I was acting entitled, that I was confused." That word again. We didn't cry. We didn't vent. We just sat there, silent, listening to the lies settle like dust in the air. "They're not just cutting me out," I finally said. Blythe didn't flinch. She said, "They're rewriting the story, so you were never supposed to be in it." That landed harder than I expected. It wasn't just erasure, it was premeditated fiction. I returned to my childhood room just before midnight. It didn't look like mine anymore, just a guest space with familiar wallpaper. Near the closet was a box that used to hold all my old letters and keepsakes. A label once read, "Destry's Things." Now it said, "Storage, Guest." I stared at the label, not angry, not sad, just done. I walked over to the mirror, wiped it with my sleeve, looked myself straight in the face. I was no longer the daughter, not even the problem. I was the liability they planned to retire. The envelope was heavier than I expected. It showed up mid-morning, hand-delivered, gold trim along the flap, embossed with the Everin Estate insignia. My name was written in cursive, clean, detached. Inside was a folded letter from Jory Anders, inviting me to a documentation review meeting. Courteous language, the kind that says everything's fine while drawing a line you're not meant to cross. I stared at it for a while. Knew what it was, knew what it wasn't. Still, I showed up. The meeting took place in a downtown Asheville office, too sleek, too sterile, trying too hard to feel warm. The kind of place where people sign things they don't fully understand, just to keep from looking unreasonable. I walked in. Marla, Harlan, and Jory were already seated. They greeted me like I was a cousin they hadn't seen since Easter. "You look well," Jory said, handing me tea. "Thanks for making the time." I didn't smile. I sat down. A folder was slid across the glass table. "Just a few final details to review," he said. The top page read, "Voluntary Transition Agreement." I flipped through. Phrases like mutual understanding, irreversible relinquishment, uncontested conclusion. It was pages of legal handshakes meant to erase me with grace. I didn't speak. Jory adjusted his cuffs. "This would formalize your agreement to step away from any claims related to the estate, a peaceful resolution." Marla leaned forward, voice syrup smooth. "We thought you'd want to close this chapter peacefully." I looked up. She smiled like a woman who's already picked out the curtain fabric for a room you'll never see. I reached into my coat pocket and palmed my phone, voice recorder already running. I laid it on my lap. Nobody noticed. I didn't yell, didn't flip the table. I just closed the folder and pushed it back. "This isn't peace," I said. "It's a muzzle." That afternoon, I didn't go home. Dinner was scheduled that evening. Another family event I couldn't skip without giving them more ammo. So I went. The house smelled of rosemary chicken, candles lit. A few people I barely recognized floated between wine glasses and stories that didn't involve me. Blythe was there. Cousin. Younger. Honest by accident. She hugged me, lingered longer than usual, glass already half empty. We sat by the fireplace. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. She leaned in. "Marla told the board you'd been unstable since your 20s, she whispered. "Said it was safer for the foundation if you stepped away." I didn't blink, didn't breathe, just listened. She laughed nervously. "I thought it was weird, but you know how she is." "Yeah, I know exactly how she is. They didn't just burn the bridge. I was still standing on it when they lit the match." Dinner went on. Harlan told a story about a trip to Sonoma. Someone made a joke about kale. People laughed. I watched the chandelier sway above the table. Watched my father chew like he didn't know what silence had cost him. I didn't say a word. When it ended, I went upstairs, slid the door to my room shut, took off my coat, pulled the phone from my pocket, and hit play. Their voices filled the room. Jory's calm reassurance, Marla's concerned manipulation, legal theater wrapped in velvet gloves. I rewound Blythe's words in my head. "Unstable since your 20s. The thing about being called unstable is, it makes stability look like denial. They'd been writing my ending long before I even opened my mouth. I opened my laptop, created a folder, titled it, Operation Recall. I typed one line. "They've weaponized calm. I'll respond with clarity." I didn't feel angry. I felt focused. And if I was once the quiet one, it's only because I was taking notes. The envelope was thin, government kind of thin. I found it tucked in the mailbox at the edge of the property, halfway buried under flyers and grocery coupons, forwarded from my old address. The return label was from the insurance provider. I wasn't expecting anything from them. I opened it standing right there in the driveway. Termination notice. I read it once. Then again, coverage discontinued. Effective immediately. At the policyholder's request, I called the number printed at the bottom, pressed through the prompts, waited on hold with the kind of patience that doesn't come from calm, but from being burned too many times to flinch anymore. When I asked for clarification, the voice on the other end didn't hesitate. "It looks like the change was initiated by Marla Everin. She's the listed primary." Of course she is. Not a heads up, not a conversation, just a click, a quiet delete, no accident, no surprise. I stood there a long time after the call ended. Mail in hand, wind brushing past me like nothing had happened. I wasn't even a loose end anymore, just a liability line they cut. That night, I couldn't sit still. Every room in the house felt off balance. Every drawer I opened seemed emptier than the last. So I climbed up into the attic. There was a box there labeled Destry. I knew what was supposed to be inside: birthday cards, old letters, the tiny notebook Mom used to write weekend reminders on for me. I opened it. Nothing but hollowed-out folders, some torn envelopes, a ribbon that used to wrap a graduation gift. I knelt down, dug deeper, found a trash bin off to the side. Inside, half buried under old receipts, was a charred envelope. The handwriting stopped me cold. It was Mom's. Partially burned. Only the top line was visible. To my daughter. That's all I could make out. I didn't cry, but I folded over and sat on the attic floor for a while. That kind of silence where your breath barely makes it out of your chest. They're not just erasing my rights, they're editing my history. They are trying to make me believe I was never loved. That's what hit hardest. Not the lost money, not the legal tricks, but the theft of something no one else should have had access to. I stood up eventually. Carried the envelope down with me. By midnight, I was at the 24-hour FedEx off College Street, opened a P.O. box, registered it under a name they wouldn't track, bought a burner phone, set up a new email. Back home, I opened my laptop and created a folder. Reclamation. They wanted me invisible. I'd let them think I was. But ghosts don't vanish. They linger. I started listing everything I could think of: the altered will, the deleted camera footage, the insurance termination, the therapy setup, the burned letter. Then I drafted one message and sent it to Milo Drayton, the only attorney who didn't owe the family a holiday ham. Subject line: if you're still taking clients with nothing left to lose. Body: let's talk. After sending it, I didn't go to bed. I made tea, poured 2 cups, then drove to the guest house. Nellie answered the door in her robe. She didn't ask questions, just let me in. We sat in her tiny kitchen, steam rising between us like a fragile truce. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "Your mother asked me once to protect something. I didn't. And I've regretted it every day." She walked to a drawer, unlocked it, and pulled out a yellowing folder. Inside, letters in Mom's handwriting, financial statements, a copy of the original estate plan. Destry Walden listed as primary heir. The date on the letter? 6 months before Marla claimed Mom had changed everything. Nellie placed the folder in my hands like it was something holy. "The truth wasn't gone," I whispered. "It was buried." She nodded. "Under their version of you." I walked home in the dark. Past the mailbox at the end of the drive, my name had been scratched off days ago. With a blade, by the look of it, Marla didn't even bother covering it. I pulled out my keys, etched it back in, crude, uneven, but mine, they erased me. I rewrote myself. The envelope was on the floor when I came home. Plain manila, no stamp, no sender. Inside was a USB drive. Sharpie scrawled across the surface. "Look." No salutation, no threat. Just that word. And it said more than anything else had in weeks. I didn't sit down, didn't breathe deep or hesitate. I plugged it into my laptop. The first folder was titled Internal. Inside were emails between Marla and Jory, dated months before Mom died. Language like restructuring the trust discreetly, presenting Destry as emotionally compromised, and the phrase that made me clench my jaw: optics management. The second folder had audio. Marla's voice, clear as daylight. Laughing softly, then saying, "No one takes her seriously. All we have to do is stay calm and let her overreact." They weren't responding to me. They were orchestrating around me. It wasn't about legality. It was about shaping reality. I didn't feel surprise. I felt sharpened. At the bottom of the USB contents was a text file. One line: "They underestimated you. Don't make the same mistake." That night, I left the house with soup in hand, homemade. I remembered Nellie used to bring it to me when I had fevers as a kid, even when Marla said I was faking. Her guest house light was still on. She opened the door without a word. We sat at her kitchen table. Nothing between us but steam rising from the mugs. 10 minutes passed before she moved. She stood, walked to a drawer, unlocked it. "I was supposed to give this to you the day after her funeral," she said. "I didn't. I got scared. And I've regretted it every day since." She handed me a folder, edges worn, yellowed at the creases. Inside was Mom's handwriting. The letter was dated 6 months before her death. It named me, clearly, directly, as the sole successor to her private trust and stated her intention to revise the public documents when the dust settles. It had 2 witness signatures. None of them were Marla's. I didn't thank Nellie. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting the weight of it fill the space between us. "We all did things to survive this house," I finally said. She nodded. "We did." Back home, I cleared off my desk. USB, letter, voice recordings, insurance notice, screenshots, handwritten statements. I started dragging them into a folder I named Reclamation. Then I opened a spreadsheet. First column, date. Second column, action. Third, cover story. Fourth, Evidence. I called Milo. He picked up on the second ring. I said, "It's time I stop asking why they did it and start showing what they did." He paused. Then, "You don't need revenge. You need leverage." That stuck with me, because I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted to outlive the version of me they built. Later that night, I pulled my old sketchbook from the bottom drawer, the one Marla had torn up when I was 14. I taped it back together, page by page. In the back cover, Mom had once written a quote in pen: "Truth doesn't beg to be seen, it just waits to be revealed." I copied it onto a fresh document, named it Opening Slide. Not for court, not yet, but for something real. I wasn't here to scream anymore. I was going to speak so clearly they'd choke on their own silence. The next morning, a courier knocked on the door. No signature required, gold seal on the envelope. Inside, an invitation to the Everin Foundation's quarterly board meeting. Marla listed as the keynote speaker. Date, time, location, all formal. I folded the paper neatly, slid it back into the envelope. Then I smiled. Perfect. I arrived 15 minutes early, not because I was eager, because I wanted the room to see me walk in first, not last. A muted gray suit, no jewelry, no gloss. I wasn't there to dazzle. I was there to end something. The ballroom looked like a wedding venue, polished floors, linen-covered chairs, and centerpieces that matched Marla's outfit. She was standing by the far wall, talking with a group of board members like they were old classmates. Laughing, touching arms. I didn't bother waving. Jory caught my eye, gave a slight nod, then moved on like I was a vendor here to service the coffee. Dad sat alone toward the back, reading papers, or pretending to. Harlan kept to the periphery, half in, half out. I took my seat in the back corner, where they'd want me, where they thought I'd behave. Marla opened the meeting with her usual poise. "Thank you all for coming," she said, as if none of us had a choice. She launched into a new initiative, Preserving Legacy Through Vision. A fancy name for a recycled pitch. She talked about art therapy, digital family archives, charitable expansions tied to Lucinda's name. But I didn't need to listen, because I'd heard every word before. They were mine. 2 years ago, sitting beside Mom's bed, I told her about a program that would help preserve memories through creative sessions for families facing grief. I drafted the proposal. Mom loved it. Marla hadn't said a word then, but apparently she'd been listening. I opened my tote, pulled out crisp packets I had prepared the night before, emails, drafts, original timestamps, printouts of my design mock-ups. I stood and began handing them out, one by one, quietly, directly. By the third row, people were whispering. A woman near the front cleared her throat, loudly. Marla paused but kept talking. Her voice cracked for the first time. Then came the slide with budget figures. One line item, consulting services J. Connors, holdings $175,000. I stood again, didn't raise my voice. "Before you approve this initiative," I said, "you might want to know where that funding really went." I handed out another sheet, short, direct, undeniable. The company was a shell, registered in Harlan's name, connected to a private account siphoning from the family estate. Marla froze. Jory stood up, attempting to defuse. I turned toward him. "Interfering with fiduciary records is still a crime in this state. Sit down." He did. Harlan slipped out of the room. I walked back to my seat, let the silence stretch. And then, Marla spoke again. She picked up the mic with a smile practiced too many times. "Destry has always been emotional. That's why these conversations are so difficult." There it was, not new, but now, public. I nodded, clicked the remote in my hand. A slide filled the screen behind me. A quote from our family therapist. Signed. Dated. Destry's approach is structured, observant, and intentional. Emotional suppression from family members has caused greater regression than any internal factor. Silence. Then murmurs, one voice cut through. Then why were we told otherwise? The shift was physical. Heads turned, from her to me. Marla's hand stayed frozen on the podium. I didn't smile. I said, being emotional never made me wrong, but hiding the truth, that makes you all part of the story now. They sat there. No one moved. A silent vote followed. Result: Marla suspended from all leadership roles pending investigation. Jory removed as legal counsel. My mother's handwritten letter, naming me heir, entered officially into the record. They offered me a board seat. I declined, but I did say one thing before I left. If this foundation wants to mean something again, start by telling the truth, even when it's inconvenient. I turned, walked down the aisle. They parted the way, not out of fear, out of respect. People expected fire. After everything that happened at the board meeting, they thought I'd want revenge, lawsuits, public statements, maybe even my name etched across the front of the estate. But I didn't want any of that. What I wanted, what I needed, was quiet. Not silence, not denial. Just the kind of quiet that comes after a long, bitter storm. Marla vanished from the spotlight. Harlan resigned from the architectural firm quietly. The foundation paused public operations. The headlines faded faster than I expected. Blythe emailed me the week after. "I'm proud of you," she wrote. Just that. Milo updated me every few days. Investigations were ongoing, but I told him I wasn't interested in watching them fall apart, because I didn't want to watch anyone fall. I just wanted to stop bleeding. Mom once wrote, "Truth doesn't beg to be seen, it just waits to be revealed." I think she was right. The next morning, I walked into the new outreach center. The name on the front desk wasn't mine, but close enough. Walden Resource Wing. I hadn't asked for that, but someone added it anyway. It made me pause, not with pride, but with a kind of gratitude I didn't have a word for yet. Inside, the space buzzed with soft energy, people unpacking boxes, hanging signs, flyers for therapy groups, creative workshops, grief circles, none of it glossy or branded, just real. I passed through the hall and stopped outside room 3. A young woman inside was unpacking binders. She looked up, wide eyes, nervous smile. "I'm Rosa," she said. "Sorry, I didn't know if this was your space or—" "It's yours," I told her. "You work here now." She hesitated, then said, "I almost didn't apply. Didn't think I was the type." I smiled. "That's exactly why we wanted you." I used to beg for a seat at their table. Turns out, I could build my own. Later that week, I met Dad at the bench Mom used to sit on every fall. We hadn't spoken since the vote. He looked older, not fragile, just smaller. "I didn't know how to protect you without upsetting your sister," he said, almost to himself. I didn't let him off easy. "You didn't have to protect me," I said. "Just believe me." He handed me a faded envelope. "Your mother wrote this, never sent it." The letter was gentle, full of pride, a little regret. I didn't cry. We sat there a while, not as father and daughter, not really. Just two people sharing the same missing person. Not all silence is avoidance. Sometimes it's just grief, learning how to breathe. One afternoon, I returned to the estate. The hall of portraits had been updated. My photo was back where it belonged. I didn't stop. I walked to the study. The bracelet was there, on a tray, clean, untouched. I picked it up, held it in my palm for a minute, then placed it in a display box right next to Mom's letter. I added a plaque beneath it, "Truth returned." Outside by the mailbox, my name was still faintly etched in from weeks ago. I didn't erase it, didn't carve it deeper either. Some scars don't need healing, they need remembering. That evening, back in my apartment, I wrote a letter. Not to my family, not to Marla, to myself, 10 years ago. I wrote what I wish someone had told me then. They don't get to decide your worth. That's a contract you write with yourself. I folded the letter, wrote one line on the envelope. "Open when you forget." Set it next to a framed quote from Mom. Then I stood by the window, watching the leaves fall. They tried to erase me. Instead, they ended up writing the most unforgettable part of my story.